Welcome to Western Synergy, a podcast about entrepreneurs, innovators, and just generally awesome people from Western Canada. My name's Nathan Johnson, and I'm joined by Trevor Lewington, the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. We're here in the wonderful Tech Connect building here in Lethbridge, Alberta, and we're hoping to learn more about what the Economic Development Lethbridge does. And so maybe you could start us off by just kind of giving us a day in the life of the CEO here.
Thanks, Nathan, for the invitation to be here. I'm excited about this discussion. That's the great thing about my job is no days are ever the same. I enjoy that part. Every day is different, brings new challenges. My team is responsible, I like to say, for brokering opportunities. So whether that's welcoming new investment to the city, a European company perhaps wants to set up a food processing plant, investment attraction, we do that. Whether it's helping an existing business here in the city, grow and expand, we do that. Maybe it's helping a film shoot, a podcast perhaps, locate in our city. We support the creative industries. And then also entrepreneurs, right? We run an incubator here at Tech Connect, but we're also here as a part of the Regional Innovation Network to support startups and provide entrepreneurs with support so that they can be successful in our city. So it's a great big mix of things, but it's always an adventure and it's always interesting.
Do you mind kind of just giving like the history on Economic Development Lethbridge, like how this all kind of got started and why?
So the Lethbridge Economic Development Initiative Society, which is what we're officially called, we do business as Economic Development Lethbridge, was created just 20 years ago. So 2 decades of service to the community. And it was originally the city council of the day passed a motion and said, we want economic development to be community driven. We want it to be driven by experts. And we want to have an opportunity for the community to be engaged. And so they created this external organization. We still receive a good chunk of our funding from the municipality. But it was that beginning to really take industry expertise as a part of our volunteer board to set the strategy and think about, at that time, what did they want Lethbridge to look like 20, 25, 30 years out? So our job is to really help not only design that future, but also execute it. And projects like this building, so Tech Connect's been around about 11 years, we're really designed to be a catalyst for startups. We originally started in geospatial technologies. We reserve the right to get smarter as we go. And so, of course, we've made adjustments to that strategy along the way. But it's catalytic projects like that that was sort of part of the reason we were created as an external agency to be free from direct political control and political influence, but to still represent the interests of the broader community of Lethbridge.
The geospatial and all the mapping stuff was quite large. And I remember there was a lot of firms all through downtown Lethbridge and some up in the industrial park that were doing that stuff. You were talking there just a bit about the 10, 20, 30-year vision. Is there anything you can talk a little bit more about, specifically what maybe Lethbridge or the Lethbridge Economic Development thinks is going to happen in the next 20 to 30 years?
So we have a number of programs. One we're focused on right now is called Canada's Premier Food Corridor. So Lethbridge is one anchor of this corridor along Highway 3. There's an enormous amount of value-added processing that already happens in our corridor, taking the raw commodities today that we have here, that we grow amazing producers in our region, and we make value-added products, whether it's a bag of Lay's potato chips coming out of a facility in Tabor, whether it's, the one of the very few, in fact, the only sugar beet plant in Canada domestically making sugar along that corridor. And it's about adding value. So we're promoting the region to international investors. Our tagline is, if you're in the business of food, you should be here. We know that there's a growing global population that's hungry and needing more food exports. And Southern Alberta has all of the right ingredients, no pun intended, whether it's, sorry, I had to get that in there.
No, the dad in me approves that.
All right, perfect. Whether it's, we have all of the commodities, we have the talent, we have the research capacity. We know that food is going to continue to be a priority for this region. So as we grow that Canada's Premier Food Corridor brand and really grow the industry here, we know that's always going to be a pillar. One of the other projects we see is something we call Canada's Western Gateway. So that's trade and logistics. So if you think about Lethbridge, we sit at the top of Highway 4. Just to the south and east of the city, you've got Can-Do, which is the third largest private rail operator in the country, has one of their terminals. And then, of course, we've got a regional airport, and we've got the only 24/7 border crossing in and out of Alberta at Coutts. So if you think about the potential of that corridor for trade, logistics, warehousing, bonded customs, there's enormous opportunity there. And I think if nothing else, the pandemic taught us that supply chains are vulnerable. And if we can fortify Alberta's supply chain infrastructure and build in this region, we know that's an opportunity as well. And so those are sort of the two fundamentals we're sort of playing with on the investment attraction side. But when it comes to technology, as you well know, every company is a technology company these days. There's no such thing as a tech sector in my mind, because every company is experimenting with AI tools. Every company is looking at, networking and other communications devices. So, I think our role in that is not necessarily trying to read the future, because I'll leave the prognostications about the future of technology to experts like you, but rather how can we support the ecosystem? How can we make sure that our post-secondaries are churning out the right tech talent that's going to enable companies to hire the right people? How do we build quality of life in this region so that, you could go probably to Vancouver or Calgary or Toronto or maybe San Francisco and work in that dream tech job. But since most of it can be done remotely and you can actually afford to buy a house here, how do we create the parks and the landscapes and the services that people want to actually build their business or build their career, but also build their life right here in Lethbridge? And I think that's really, for the future of workforce, that's a big role for us to think about how we play in that space.
Yeah, that's a really bright future. I didn't even know how logistically strategic Lethbridge was. That's really quite impressive. And it makes sense why we have such a high amount of industrial and processing and manufacturing in this area. And it just seems to be doing nothing but growing. I wouldn't mind backing up a little bit more and kind of asking, which is quite a hot topic, is what has been your guys' experience maybe on the artificial intelligence from just dealing with investment, new entrepreneurs, tech investors, just around that area? What's been your overall experience so far?
I'll maybe start with just an example of how we're using the technologies, and we've been on a bit of a learning curve ourselves. So, investment attraction is often about prospecting. So that's historically been cold calls and going to trade shows and conventions. And so we're using a digital product that is an AI tool. And what it does is it identifies parameters that we can populate. So we'll say, we're interested in food ingredient companies. We're looking for companies that are expanding. We're looking for companies that are interested in the Canadian market. That software will then go out and scrape every website, every press release, every convention agenda, and it will find companies that match our criteria that are proactively looking to expand and could be potential targets for investment attraction. That software then feeds us, key contacts, publicly available websites, and other information, which you can conveniently then take and put into a product like ChatGPT to create a letter and an email and an introduction that's customized to the company. So that market research, that cold calling, that sort of qualification process historically would have taken us weeks to really identify key targets and do the work. Between those two software platforms, and they're not really intended to work together, but if we stitch those two things together, we can generate a list and generate some, initial content in minutes. Yeah. And so that's really changed the game. And so for us, learning those lessons and seeing how it's been demonstrated, I think was really interesting. And so that's, I think our role is teaching people about the AI tools that are out there. How does AI work? And, what is actually artificial intelligence, and what's a relational database? What's generative? I mean, there's a lot of complexity. People throw around that phrase quite loosely. But there are many, many tools. And if we can help people understand the tools that are available to them and harness them, I think every business can benefit.
That's really amazing. And it's good to hear that you guys are integrating that stuff. Would you say, from your feeling of using artificial intelligence, that you're getting the 10x return on your investment with it?
Well, I would say I am. Thankfully, I work with people that are a lot smarter than I am. The challenge, of course, is understanding how does the system actually work? And I use chat as the example because I think everyone's familiar with it.
Yeah.
You can ask some really dumb questions and get not great information back. So the quality of your prompt and learning how to ask questions and reframe questions and give that tool context so that you get the answer back you want. And so, it can take 4 or 5 iterations of a question before the system will feed you back. So I think that's important that people learn those techniques. We also have to be mindful, and they talk about how artificial intelligence can hallucinate.
Yeah.
In terms of when and where it pulls information from, it will not necessarily come back with something that's true or accurate.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. But it will come back with an answer, right? And so we're starting to learn that ourselves so that we can help educate others.
So as you guys work with companies and entrepreneurs, are you giving any certain types of advice or anything around the use of artificial intelligence, or any type of adoption suggestions or anything like that?
Yeah, so a number of our business advisors that are available to entrepreneurs certainly have more expertise in that space. We're just encouraging entrepreneurs to make sure they're aware of some of the tools and that they're starting to practice them and use them and integrate them where it makes sense. At the end of the day, these technologies are fairly ubiquitous now. They're out there. They're available to everyone. And so if you're not already using them, in my mind, you're somewhat behind. And it's not that it's going to replace you or it's going to replace your staff or replace your systems. But again, what are the small things that you can automate? What are the small things you can do that will just deliver efficiency? And so it starts there. And as people learn, they can expand and take on other platforms, I think.
Yeah, I think the idea behind AI taking jobs is that I think a lot of people don't reflect on the past to remember that this has been almost every technological revolution was people had a concern for their families. And so it's not a disingenuous concern, is that I'm sure the first people that saw the radio or the loom or even a shovel, remembering that you would have had to dig holes with your hands beforehand, that this probably reduced job requirements a lot. But the other side is that when people were freed up from doing mundane tasks, they were more available to do more creative, thought-based processes that give us today's society. So I think, for me, that's the part that I look at AI is I always wonder what people see is the look of their organization after AI. So the question I would pose is once you start seeing AI becoming as common as, say, the cell phones in our pocket, where everyone's integrated with it, is there any predictions or things that you see in the future that are going to be, heavily benefited from this that you're interested in?
I'm excited about the future of the potential of those technologies. To your point, there has always been discomfort, I'll say, with technological change. I think we're human; that's natural. There's a lot of doom and gloom out there about how it's going to be the end of us, and I always joke that I'm very nice to my laptop in case one day it takes over, and I just want it to remember me that I was kind to it and charged it regularly.
Yeah.
But seriously, I think again, we start looking at the potential of even just how to automate mundane tasks. So, for us, we receive information through our website. That used to be a manual process. People had to order content that we could send them. That's all done entirely by automated solutions on the back end now. And that's freed up people that would have been doing that work to engage more proactively with our clients. And I think, again, routine customer service functions, if we can automate those. Again, there are some not great systems out there. Many of us have been on those phone loop of death as you sort of press one to continue. And there are some terrible examples.
Yeah.
But as those technologies improve, it will make life easier. It will simplify processes. And ultimately, it should save us all some time and money. And I think that's really key. It's not to be afraid of it, but how can we harness the potential of it and better understand it?
In Economic Development Lethbridge, or maybe specifically the Tech Connect Alberta Innovates realm, maybe you can talk about what you primarily work with entrepreneurs on.
Our organization is twofold. So we have this physical building, a technology incubator here at Tech Connect. So there are a number of offices. We have tech companies that are in this building. They rent space. They're here because they need an environment that's supportive, where they've got people across the hall who are not competitors, but they can shoot the breeze and they can exchange ideas with other entrepreneurs and still have professional meeting spaces and work. So the incubator itself provides a platform and a foundation for some companies. Many companies don't need that. I think obviously COVID changed the world a little bit. We're all used to working as perhaps digital nomads to some extent, or we're able to hot desk in somebody else's space. So we work with an organization called RINSA. It's the Regional Innovation Network of Southern Alberta, which is about 20 different partners that collectively come together to support entrepreneurs. So we've got everybody around the same table. And Alberta Innovates is a funder of the RIN. There are a number of regional innovation networks across the province, but ours is focused obviously on Southern Alberta. But it includes Lethbridge Polytechnic, it includes the university, it includes the National Research Council, who have technical people here in town, it includes Alberta Innovates, it includes the Chamber of Commerce, it includes organizations like ours. And the way the system works, how we support entrepreneurs, is we'll do an intake with a new client, no matter what their business is, no matter where they're at. And that group will get together and figure out what's the best support to put them with. So for example, someone comes to us and says, I'm not bankable yet. I'm a startup. I need non-traditional finance. Well, great. Community Futures, federally funded. They're at the table. They'll say, hey, let me take that. Let's see if we can work through that. Troy at Community Futures will sit down and Again, it might not be his organization that funds them, but his job is to help connect them to financial resources. Perfect. Next client comes in. I really need help and support with prototyping. Well, Lethbridge Polytechnic and the university both have 3D printers. They both have applied research opportunities. Maybe they're the right partner. So, our organization is a member at the table. We help facilitate that. We're the fiscal agent for the RIN. We work with Alberta Innovates to make sure the granting programs are running and facilitate the meetings, provide a physical space. But it's really all of those partners working together collaboratively to support the entrepreneur to sort of take that file and figure out whose desk does it belong to and where can we support and shift people and resources around. And that's the power of a network, of course, is that I'm not going to know everything. I'm not going to know everyone or what's available. But if I can connect the right people and broker those relationships, then we're winning.
And so when you're working with entrepreneurs, what is kind of the thing that you find that this network is the strongest at? Like, so what's the one thing that is really brought forward to those entrepreneurs that really helps them? So if you had to pick one or two topics.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think, we've served about 550 entrepreneurs last year through the network. So that's to me, in a community like Lethbridge, that's a pretty impressive number. And I think the fundamental is just the access to those resources. So, in a traditional environment where we're all siloed and working independently, I've got my little scope and these are the things that I'll do. If a file comes in and I can't help them in a traditional world, that simply gets rejected, or I send you on your merry way and say, good luck. In this environment with the Regional Innovation Network, with RINSA, nobody's going to do that. No matter where it comes into the system, no matter which organization you make entry, the intent is that we collectively then work to figure out what's the best resource. So the power of that network, 20 organizations working together for those entrepreneurs, I think is the key thing. And now it's also not perfect. We do require people to actually build a business plan. And so some entrepreneurs will come to us with an idea, and that's great, but it is not a business plan. They haven't necessarily thought about whether anyone's willing to pay for that service or product. And so we use the business model canvas as sort of the initial teaching tool. And generally speaking, no matter where you're at, when you come in through the system, that's where you start. You actually have to do some market validation. We require you to go talk to actual customers to validate that someone's willing to pay for your product or service. Because if you haven't got that part figured out, none of the rest of the details really matter, right? Don't bother prototyping if you actually haven't identified your customer yet.
Does going through that process kind of vet out some of the people that come through the process? What would you say, like, if you had to guess, out of, say, 10 people, how many people continue on past that point?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have that stat in the back of my head, but there are certainly people that drop out of the process at every step along the way. And there are people that, they're really committed to their idea and they really fundamentally believe that they've got a great concept. And we wish them success. We have a bit of an approach. There's a bit of discipline required. There's a bit of structure, and it's not a perfect fit for everyone. And so there are some entrepreneurs that will perhaps find success another way, and that's fine. There are also entrepreneurs that will come into the system that perhaps we can't help or are too far along. But there are other provincial organizations. There are a number of accelerators, for example, that are funded by the province that we can graduate people to or refer people to that are outside the system. So again, it's about recognizing what are the resources out there and where can we send people to get that additional support.
That makes sense. It's really good that people get the opportunity to come in and vet this stuff. And sometimes exiting ends up being a good thing for a person because they've come to the point where they've now realized the feasibility or the, even the desirability of that. A lot of times I find from talking to people about their own ideas is that usually viability is the first one that people figure out as they say, can I do this? And it would be a great idea because, everything sounds awesome. Like if I wanted to say, hey, both you and I should fly to the moon because it's really cool up there. That's viably doable, but feasible. I don't know how much money you have on you versus I do, but we're also not, astronauts. And so I think going through that process that you guys are providing is helping a lot of people learn what's required for them to take those things and take them to the next step. Kind of pushing this topic a little bit back more to, our grounding here in Lethbridge. Have you found around like doing this type of work in Alberta to be any different than from what you might experience listening to people that you might work with that are in, out east or in Eastern Canada at all? Or is there any challenges that you're facing here in Western Canada that are kind of unique to us?
I think for me, Lethbridge is a relatively small community. We're only about 112,000 people. Very few people nationally know where a Lethbridge is, and certainly on the international scene, a Lethbridge doesn't exist, right? And so we have a bit of a challenge, I think, just to feel good about ourselves and feel confident that we've got some skills and talent here. And when you start peeling back the onion and when you really start digging into the ecosystem in Lethbridge, it always blows me away at the talent that's here. So as an example, we've got a company here that's doing work on a blockchain platform for mining in Nigeria. If you can do that, if you can do mining in Nigeria on a blockchain platform for trading here in Lethbridge, you can do anything. And there are people doing there's some amazing technologies. I think about, a company that spun out of the university was called Iunctus Geomatics. It became Blackbridge. It was then subsequently purchased by Planet out of San Francisco, which is the largest geospatial company in the world. But that company that was founded at the university drew a San Francisco big player to Lethbridge. They've since been acquired, but that was a Lethbridge company. It was a startup here in this building and on the campus next door that was created in this community. So we have world-class talent in this community, and there are some companies doing some just amazing things.
Is there anything that you're hoping to see over the next 5 years either improve or become available to kind of empower people further?
I do think the technology continues to democratize access to these things. So, we can have video calls now with funders in New York. You used to have to always get on a plane and do a pitch deck and go to some of these competitions. It's now quite normal to have a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, and that's actually often the first introduction, right? So the barriers of being in a small, in quotation marks, or remote market like a Lethbridge, a lot of technology and sort of the societal expectation, I think, has completely wiped that out. We have these two world-class post-secondary institutions between Lethbridge Polytechnic and the University of Lethbridge. There's 16,000 students in town, right? And all of the faculty and all of the research that goes on. We have the horsepower in this community. And as businesses work with those institutions to fine-tune programs and give feedback, there's the opportunity to unlock all kinds of potential there as well. So we have all the right ingredients. It's just a function of how do we properly unleash that and not hold ourselves back.
Question for myself, I guess, is that for already existing businesses, do you have any services and stuff that specifically Lethbridge Economic Development and yourself provide to existing technology companies?
Yeah, again, we have a herd of business advisors that are paid by Alberta Innovates. And so again, depending on where your business is at, there may be things that you can benefit from those business advisors. If it's not local services through us, it might be one of those provincial accelerator programs. They typically operate out of Edmonton and Calgary, but we can make those referrals. And then ultimately, if it's even bigger than that, we would look to our government friends to make referrals and connect us to other resources. And one example that comes up is companies that are looking to export technologies or export products, maybe break into another international market. Well, the Government of Canada has the Trade Commissioner Service. There are over 160 offices around the world, federal government employees employed by the Government of Canada in market specifically to support companies with their expansions. So, if you said, I'm working on this digital platform for product X, and I know there's just a wicked market in Ireland, well, there's actually a Trade Commissioner Service person in Ireland whose sole job it is to support you on that project and help you figure out that market and de-risk it for you. So that's not something I can provide, but I can certainly make that introduction and connect you to that resource.
Talking more about how your involvement with other existing businesses are going right now, is there things that businesses like mine can be doing to help support you and your role within this organization?
Certainly, we welcome feedback. So, if businesses that are interacting with us, if they're finding that our services are perhaps not covering a niche that they require, or they feel like there's a gap, we don't know what we don't know. So I would encourage businesses to reach out, ask the questions. Hey, what can you do for me? And give us feedback if they've been through our programs, what they liked, what they didn't like. We're always looking for, ideas on how we can improve or suggestions. The other challenge we have sometimes, of course, is government funding. And so we do have to tailor our approach and our programs to reflect where we get the money from and what the priorities are of those political taskmasters. And that's not a bad thing. The government has limited resources. We're taxpayers. We want money to be used responsibly. So there can be certainly times where we're not able to support an entrepreneur. But again, our job would hopefully be able to find them another point of service or another referral. So yeah, feedback would certainly be the first thing. The second thing I would just encourage businesses, if there are needs out there, and even if it doesn't relate to us, so around workforce, right? I hear all the time that businesses are struggling to find talent. Interesting. What talent? What specifically are the skills that they're missing? And where are you expecting those to come from? So one of the challenges our post-secondaries have is a lack of industry engagement when they're building curriculum or trying to determine which programs to offer. So if businesses can be at the table, both institutions have advisory committees and advisory councils. I mean, if I was a business owner, I'd want to be front and center, making sure my demands were top of mind for what those institutions are building, recognizing that programs take 2 or 3 years to approve and to adjust because it is a bureaucratic process, right? So again, the more businesses can be directly involved in providing tangible, specific feedback, whether it's to us, to post-secondaries, or to government, get involved and be involved in advocating for what you need.
I know, talking with Lethbridge Polytechnic, and I know you're involved with them too a bit, that definitely that change from Lethbridge College to Lethbridge Polytechnic, I think they're hoping to obviously put more of an emphasis on the different type of career paths that they can provide for people. Is quite exciting for me, and I'm assuming that you're also quite on board with that kind of that shift. Yeah, and it's been a little while. Is there like for Lethbridge itself, is there anything that you're seeing coming up in the near future that people should be looking out for or paying attention to when it kind of comes to this area or category of the business development world in Lethbridge?
Yeah, we know, for example, most of our traditional manufacturing companies are looking heavily at automation. Many of them are far down the path. So instrumentation, controls, programming, operator interface terminals, even the robotic systems, right? Material handling systems as an example. The talent that's required that are tech jobs, but we don't necessarily think of them as tech jobs. There's an enormous opportunity there that both our institutions have to create programming for, but our businesses also have to be clear on what they need. Secondarily, we hear from tech companies all the time, whether they're building software or building applications or building websites, that the number of graduates we have locally each year is not sufficient to meet the demand. And so, we need to import talent from other centers. I have no problem stealing from Vancouver and Calgary on a regular basis. That's a good thing to bring in new talent because you can buy a house here and afford to live. But it's also about making sure that we are mindful of where those trends are going. What are the skills required, right? So as technologies change, as platforms change, are we keeping up to date? Are we making sure people are nimble enough to adopt new languages or new platforms and adapt accordingly?
Being based here in Western Canada, is there any other things that you think have an impact or play a really important role within Lethbridge Economic Development? Maybe just like energy being like a really big one, and agriculture. I don't think we touched on those two topics. How do those kind of affect the things that you do day to day and the decisions that you're making here at this organization?
Yeah, I mean, if we think about Western Canada, traditionally, we've been the hewers of wood and the haulers of water, as they say, right? We take raw commodities or raw products, we export them to another country where they process them, add all the value, create all the jobs, and then we buy it back at a premium. I really think our future continues to be on where we add value. And it could be food products like we've talked about here in Canada's Premier Food Corridor. It could be harnessing the power of energy. I have a colleague who references Southern Alberta as the Saudi Arabia of wind and solar, right? And if you think about the enormous potential in hydrogen and carbon capture, we already dominate in this region in wind and solar, but energy itself could be a massive export and a massive opportunity for growth, not just in Lethbridge, but Alberta as a whole. We know that the energy transition is happening. Global demand for oil is at some point going to peak. And so, what are we doing to prepare for that future? And we already do a great job. Alberta has a long history of being experts at raw product extraction, energy conversion, new technology adoption. Well, how do we read the tea leaves and make sure that we continue to be global leaders, not just in oil and gas, but in all of those other forms of energy as well? And so, again, converting things and making things is what Albertans do best. And I think we just have to make sure we've got the right set of skills, the right set of entrepreneurs, and the right set of supports so that we can truly, I joke when I say this, but every time I present, I talk about TWD, or total world domination. we can feed the world, we can supply technology, we can supply energy. There's no reason that Lethbridge can't show Western Canada what's possible. And if everybody does what we're doing, Western Canada could truly be a global exporter in all the things.
Yeah. It's refreshing hearing you say that. One of the things since I moved to Alberta was that I always heard multiple sides of let's say political spectrum of people discussing this exact topic. And the part that always came to me is that, like, growing up, using computers, you immediately learn that things working together are more powerful. That's just like the first thing you learn when you use a computer, that you learn how the processor works, you learn how the memory works, and then you start putting things together with the hard drive and all the other pieces. And you're like, wow, if I put all these things together, cool things happen. And being here in Alberta, and I've worked my jobs, I've been managers, I've been like an equity stake owner, and now doing ownership and own companies that are growing. And the one thing for me with Alberta was that I always thought to myself, I'm like, well, why can't we just do all the things? So why can't we just dominate energy, period? Why can't we also dominate food processing and the logistics and just be an incredibly strong place? So I don't know why it needs to be, when we talk about these things, one or the other. Why can't it just sort of be all of them? We have the infrastructure. Alberta builds, some of the best things on earth. And I'd love to see that continue. So it's really nice here, obviously hearing someone echo how I feel back to me. And it's just a really, really important thing to me that when we built our companies, that we wanted to see Albertans and the people in Alberta and the people that helped give me my life and my family's life do a lot better. Speaking of that, is there anything else that you see for Alberta from a tech perspective that you think people should maybe keep an eye out for, or something that you've seen happening that's kind of more interesting or happening maybe in the background that you can share?
Well, I think Calgary is an excellent case study, right? So if you think about Calgary, a very traditional, headquarters sort of town, boom and bust economy, clearly a central center for oil and gas, and always has been, and suffered the rise and fall as a result of that. But they very consciously set out about 5 years ago to become a tech center. And I'm sure at the time, there were a lot of people in other communities across the country sort of scratching their head, like Calgary, YYC, like where the Calgary Stampede is, that place. And yet you look over the last 5 years, there's been billions of dollars of investment in Calgary by tech companies, many global international superstars, and many large who have recognized that vision. They've recognized the ecosystem and the potential and have invested in Calgary. And so, hats off, tip of the cowboy hat to the folks in Calgary who had that vision, went after it, and have created that environment, and all of the governments, provincially and federally, that have supported it with different incentives. But if Cowtown, the oil and gas center of the universe, can make that transition to be a tech hub, we have no excuse. We should absolutely be riding on their coattails and be building our own story based on that example.
I think it's great that Calgary's doing that, because we're only really a hop, skip, and a step away from them. So I think we're going to be able to benefit greatly from that. And along with all the changes that we've discussed during this episode, just about technology change, the awesome work that you're doing, Lethbridge Polytechnic changing around some of the stuff that they're doing, I think the future is just incredibly bright when it comes to technology and innovation in Western Canada. And there's even a lot of really good things happening with our neighbors to the west and east of us too, which I'm excited to hear more about, and hopefully we'll learn more about as we go down the road in this podcast. Before we go, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just build on what you said earlier. Lethbridge's community brand is Brighter Together. So when we use Brighter Together, we're talking about a bright future, but we're also talking about the bright people that are here. But we're also talking about the fact that it's together. It's that collaborative environment that makes a difference. So I'll come back to what you said earlier. It's not about this or that. It's not about oil and gas or renewables as an example. It's the power of and. We are brighter together when we work together for that and.
And I appreciate that, because coming together and just even having this conversation, you brought so much education to myself, and I'm inspired by just what you're doing. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come onto this podcast today and share what you have to teach.